Funding for the art show was made possible by Montgomery County Arts and Cultural District, the Virginia W. Kettering Foundation, proud supporter of the arts in our community, and viewers like you. Thank you.
In this edition of the art show, Tony and Emmy award-winning actress and singer Leslie Uggams visits Dayton. A truly unique Columbus woodturner, spirituality finds its expression in stained glass, and a photographic road trip spanning decades. It's all ahead on this edition of The Art Show. Hello, I'm Rodney Veal, and welcome to The Art Show, where each week we give you unprecedented access to local, regional, and national artists and arts organizations. Wright State University has a strong theater, dance, and motion picture college. But with the new musical theater initiative bringing legendary talent to Dayton, it just got stronger.
Wow.
Thank
and
you.
when I knock on your dressing room door, remember that I said, wow. You are wonderful. And I mean,
During a campus visit, Wright State University performing arts students were coached and given valuable feedback by the Tony and Emmy award-winning actress and singer Leslie Uggams. Uggams is the first major visiting artist to conduct master classes and perform as a guest of the school's new musical theater initiative. Joe Deere, professor of musical theater and director of the initiative, knew exactly who the first guest needed to be.
Joe Deere and I did the national company of Anything Goes. When Joe had asked me about doing a master class, I was kind of like, really? Me? How do you think I could do one? And he went, are you kidding me? All the stuff that you have done in your career? And I thought, well, you know, if I'm going to do it, I know the best place to do it would be with Joe Deere, and I know that I'll be able to be comfortable and free enough to give these young people advice and talk to them about my experiences and tell them what they're in for.
The Musical Theater Initiative celebrates and explores the history, culture, and craft of the musical theater through guest artist residencies, concert performances, and international conferences. In the first component of the initiative, the masterclass, Ms. Uggams and her music director, composer, and jazz musician Don Rebick provided 12 students detailed individual feedback on their singing and their song selections.
Crank it out, you know. You know, all that. You can do that. You can do that. I mean, come on, this is all about, you know, what you feel, and don't be afraid. Whenever I'm doing a show, and there's always young people in the show, and then they're always interested in what I do, how I got here, and stuff like that, so I'm always talking to them. And then I start telling them stories about certain things I did, and everybody says, you got to write a book. And you know, and they'll sit down with me and ask me questions about certain things, and then if I see something wonderful that they're doing, I like to let them know that they're doing wonderful things on that stage, and they can take it further. And so I'm always giving advice, because young people are always asking me about the business, and they all like to watch me rehearse, watch my process when I'm rehearsing, and they find it interesting how I go about doing my stuff.
Ms. Uggams also performed several songs and participated in a question and answer session where she shared stories of her early career at the Apollo, her most famous role as Kizzy on Roots, and revealed a very little known fact about working with the Pulitzer Prize-winning playwright August Wilson.
And in the script, there's no punctuation. It's just, you have to figure that out yourself, yes. And so therefore, I was like, I'm not getting the sync. What is going on? And
I
then
mean, really, no periods or commas or capital letters or anything?
it was just...
It's just a straight
It was
wall
just a
of
straight
words?
wall of words. And so you have to know where you're going with this. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is so complicated. How am I going to do this? And then I realized, as I started looking at it, that it's like improvisation, jazz thing, you know? And then I got the feeling of it. And
Ms. Uggams had no shortage of advice and tips for those seniors who were preparing for auditions post-graduation. She encouraged each of them to pick material that best showcased their talents and told them to be bold.
I know it's scary, and I know you get nervous and everything, but you go out there and you say, listen, world, you have not seen anything till you've seen me. That's the way you have to think in your head. First of all, to get a Broadway show now, you have to be a superstar or a television star. I came from television, so I'm not one to complain about that. The problem is there used to be more of an opportunity for young talent coming up to be in the theater. It's hard for them to get an opportunity now, and I worry about that. You nailed it, honey.
The masterclass concluded with Miss Uggams working privately with a select group of students who would join her the following night in an intimate performance at the Victoria Theater. Even after 60-plus years in show business, Leslie Uggams can't and doesn't limit herself.
If material comes to me and it speaks to me, jumps off the page, then I want to do it. And that's how I've always felt, even with songs. If a song speaks to me, I don't care if it's rock, whatever. If I can interpret it in my way without trying to copy somebody else's version, then that's what I want to do.
To learn more about Leslie's long and impressive career, visit the art show link at thinktv.org.
Daniel Brown, I'm an impressionist artist. My art tip for you would be to make sure that when you're working, to step back often and see your painting from a distance. It gives you a different perspective rather than just up close, more like the viewer would have if they're going to be looking at your work.
We receive quite a few emails each week, so keep contacting us with your story ideas. Let us know what sets you apart from other artists. Send an email to theartshow@thinktv.org. Include contact information and links to performances or art samples online. When Dennis Devendra decided to take up wood turning and use lathes, he had a hard time finding mentors who would teach him. People were apprehensive about helping a blind man operate machinery that reaches speeds of more than 1,000 RPMs. But Dennis persevered despite his challenges and is now vice president of the Central Ohio Woodturners Association. Let's go inside Dennis's home workshop where he makes all of his creations.
So I have been turning wood since 2004. Wood turning is the process of shaping wood. Now all the tools, everything stays still and the wood spins, and then you carve the wood with tools. And the wood that you want to use for wood turning, pretty much anything. I mean, you don't even have to use wood. You could use acrylics, people use styrofoam. There's all kinds of materials you could use. What gives you the best result is hardwoods. The harder the wood, the denser the grain, the smoother the finish. It can look pretty impressive once you get some of these hardwoods that come out with their colors. I haven't been blind forever. I didn't even know that I was going to go blind until I was about 20 years old. I have a hereditary eye disease called retinitis pigmentosa. I went blind when I was 27. Well, I stopped driving when I was 27 years old. I was doing some woodworking here in Columbus, and I was over at the woodwork store. I went and I bought a lathe and some tools and took it home, and it went okay for a while. I was making pens and getting a lot of success out of that. You know, I kind of got bored after a while, and I really wanted to go a little further with my turning. Nobody wanted to work with me because they were afraid that, you know, working with a guy who's blind, you know, that, oh, you know, you shouldn't be working with power tools. See, this is emotional for me because it's so, it's everybody tells me I can't do this. A friend of ours in New York was getting into wood turning as well, so he decided, you know, he was willing to show me how to turn a bowl. And I said, oh, that's great. So we went up to upstate New York, and we put a piece of wood on the lathe, and we spent the afternoon turning a bowl. It was beautiful. I mean, I look at it now, it's pretty bad. But it was my bowl. It was a great bowl, and it was a good start. So I knew the mechanics at that point. So I brought, you know, took my knowledge and got some additional equipment and started turning bowls, and started getting a little bit better at bowls. If you walked into my shop, you wouldn't say, hey, this is a shop for somebody who's blind. It's organized. When I have my shop laid out, I have the tools in a certain spot, and I may even have marks on the handles. And so I know where all the tools are. For measuring, I have what's called a click stick, and it's just a device. It's about 6 inches long, and it clicks out at 1/16 of an inch increments. For centering, you know, when you put a piece of wood on the lathe, you need to have it centered so it's not off centered, so it doesn't rock when it goes on the lathe. You know, take a circle, just a circle of wood, and exactly in the middle you put a little hole. And so when you want to center a piece of wood with a nail, you just poke a little bit of a dimple in the wood, and so that's where you know to chuck up your lathe and how to square it. Now there are safety concerns, but they're the same safety concerns as anybody. I use my touch, I use my hearing when I turn, when I'm teaching other people, and I do that now. I listen, and I have them listen. When I rough down a piece of wood, it's going to be square when it's on the lathe, and so there's corners coming at me, and I just have to make sure I know where my hands are, and so once that wood is roughed down to a cylinder, then I can put my hands on it and feel the cuts as I'm making them. I do all this stuff by myself in the shop. The only thing that I ask somebody else to do, my wife to do, is she'll put the finish on for some of the things. She'll look through and see if there's a tool mark or something like that on the wood so that I can't feel. That besides that, it's all me. It's not a matter of whether we're going to have challenges in our life. It's like, how do you deal with those? Are you going to let those challenges take you, or are you going to take them on and overcome those challenges? Stop thinking about me as a blind person, but thinking me as a wood turner who's blind.
Dennis also gives motivational speeches, encouraging others to persevere through challenges. To listen, visit the Art Show at thinktv.org for the link. Did you miss an episode of the Art Show? No problem. You can watch it on demand at thinktv.org. You'll find all of the previous episodes, as well as current episodes and links to the artists we feature. Next up is a family glass studio in St. Louis. For 5 generations, they have stayed connected to the history of their faith through art, creating stained glass pieces. They work with churches of all denominations with one mission: to awaken spirituality through the medieval art form of stained glass. Take a look.
I think a lot of people dismiss sacred art because they see it as restrictive. There are too many boundaries and rules that we have to follow. It's actually quite the opposite. I think a musician, once he understands music theory, it's only then that he's able to really improvise and have fun. It's same as with stained glass sacred art, is that once you understand your theology, then you can have fun, then you can avoid repeating the same images over and over. You know, stained glass isn't simply angels or saints. It has the whole of God's plenitude at your disposal. And we have an infinite source as our subject, and so you have quite a few options to play with.
My great-grandfather was trained in the Munich School of Fine Arts in Bavaria, Germany, and when he emigrated in the early 1890s to this country, settled in St. Louis eventually, and we've been here ever since. One thing our studio has always been known for is the depth of theology. Everybody who works here has been trained here. They all have their master's or bachelor's degrees in art or theology or architecture. We tend to try to embed many different layers of theology within our windows, some that are immediately obvious when you walk into a church. You see color and form, but we also want people to be able to study these windows and discover things that happen after they've been sitting in the church for a year or 2 or 3.
I am charged with meeting with committees of various churches and generating content for their sacred space. So I work with a committee to nail down what they want in terms of content in their building. My job is to make something beautiful, conceptually rigorous, so that it's not kitschy. It transcends that and becomes something that has a durable presence over the life of the building, even longer than that.
Everyone here does a number of things. My biggest responsibility is to cut the glass. So the artist will set forth a general scheme of colors, and I try and capture the spirit of that, realizing all the while that a color on paint or a color on paper and color on glass are two wildly different things.
The cutting of the glass affects the aesthetic outcome of the window, but even after I've painted on it, it has to be put together. That's hours and hours of work. So for this to be possible, you really have to divide the labor. So we have glazers and cementers and people who install the window. They all affect the outcome of that window.
So we have two real materials that we work with. The first is glass and just different interplay between colors and textures. The second material is actually immaterial, and that's light. The challenge is largely trying to determine what the lighting conditions will be. A north-facing window is different from an east-facing window. The seasonal sun also plays into that part too. And just knowing how each color reacts when it's lit up, next to an adjacent piece of glass.
We do it exactly the same way. It was done in the 12th, 13th, 14th centuries. Dad says a 15th century glazer could come to work for us today, and by tomorrow he'd be familiar with everything that we do.
People came to us and said, why don't you design your windows on a computer? There's CAD programs. Well, I've seen CAD programs, and they tend to look more like a cartoon, but the handcraft still has an organic feel, and it surprises people, and it is true. That's one of the things where we adhere to the old ways, is our art, our style, the way the windows look.
After the Middle Ages, society became literate, and at that point our charge changed, and now rather than being a picture book for the theology of stained glass, now our intent is to spark the discussion about our faith, so that as people start to inspect our windows, and we want these windows to be current for an 18-year-old or a 48-year-old or an 88-year-old, and we want it to be current, 100 years from now. So we want that spark of discussion, that discovery to happen, so that the people who do discover the theology within our windows, and usually we embed 2, 3, 4 different layers of theology, some to be discovered right away, some not to be discovered until, years later.
There seems to be quite a bit of demand for mosaics in sacred spaces currently. So we are designing mosaics, and we've done several large projects in recent years. So we use glass, but We also use stone mosaics, and we also handcraft tiles if the design calls for that. So it's, in a way, an opposite medium from our stained glass, because the stained glass is predicated on transmitted light, whereas the mosaic functions on reflected light. So they're opposite mediums, but they're both with glass or ceramics.
How often do you get a chance to work in something so beautiful, it's so permanent, and leave such a footprint in history, and work all over the world? So it seems like each generation has to choose it on their own. For 5 generations now, it looks like it's in really good hands.
If this has piqued your interest in stained glass, Renaissance Glass Studio in Kettering offers classes. Check them out on the Art Show page at thinktv.org. Finally, tonight, photographer Tom Furterbar of Wisconsin, who studied with the legendary Ansel Adams, has spent the last 40 years focusing his lens on the landmark of Route 66 and the landscapes of the American West. Furterbar's decades of work clearly capture his passion for photography.
I enjoy shooting the West. I enjoy shooting mountains, scenery. I also enjoy like Route 66, the memory of it, the old dilapidated homes, beat up cars. I don't know why, but it's in my DNA to like that subject matter. My name is Tom Furterbar, and I'm a retired advertising and fine art photographer. I wanted to be a photographer from the age of 12 when my sister gave me a box camera. I really found it a nice way to express my emotions. I'm better, I think, at doing it visually than in words. It's a strange thing. All I knew is I wanted to be a photographer. When I finished high school, I applied at the Milwaukee Journal to be a photographer. And of course, with a high school education, they wouldn't accept me, but they gave me a job as a copy boy, which was an editorial assistant, $18 a week. I worked there about 1.5 years, but they kept telling me, Tom, you got to go to college if you want to be a photographer here. So I went to University of Wisconsin, graduated from there, and moved on to spend 1 year at the Leighton School of Art. My personal photography is, right now, it's devoted to shooting the Tetons National Park and Route 66. It's difficult to shoot the old road. It's pretty hard to make a good picture of the old road. But I enjoy shooting the older buildings as they're dilapidating. And in a way, there'll always be the ability to shoot Route 66 because the buildings along the way, some of them are decaying more and more and more, and some of the newer ones today will be decaying in 10 or 12 years. So there's always a new supply of old buildings and old cars and so on to photograph. So it isn't like you've exactly run out of subjects. My plan normally is to say shoot one state. Okay, let's say I'm going to go out this trip for 10 or 12 days and I'll shoot New Mexico. So I'll drive to the edge of New Mexico and then start shooting. Might take me 3 or 4 or 5 days to cross New Mexico. Then I'll come back, because coming back you see different things. The lighting is different. You see subjects from a different angle. So I'll shoot New Mexico coming back too. And then if I see something in some of the other states, Missouri or Kansas or Illinois, I'll shoot them too. But basically I'll go out and shoot one state. I like black and white for some fine art subjects. For Route 66, I think I like the color better. Ansel Adams is probably my primary mentor. I learned about him, I guess that would be shortly after I finished college in the 50s, and was lucky enough to get an invitation to one of his seminars. It was his 3rd seminar, and he only accepted 20 students, and the seminar was 10 days long, but it was a tremendous experience working with him. Just a marvelous experience. And that's one I'll never forget. We were out there one day near Mariposa, California, photographing some barns. And then I saw near the bottom of the barn a cluster of barley growing up in front of the weathered wood of the barn. And I said, "God, that'd be a beautiful shot." But boy, it's going to look just like Ansel Adams shot it, you know, and he's here, and if I set up my camera, he's going to say, "Can't you do anything original?" You know. So I set it up to make a horizontal cropping, which I knew was wrong because it should be vertical. Everything was going that way, and you shouldn't try to make something vertical into a horizontal. But anyways, I set it up. Okay, Ansel came by a little while later, and he bent down under the focusing cloth, which is that black cloth that covers the camera, and he looked into the camera for a while, and he took the cloth off, and he looked at me, and he said, "Tom, don't you think that should be a vertical?" So that really made me happy, because that's what I wanted. So of course I took the back of the camera, turned it, made my vertical shot, and that's one of the shots that I'm most proud of from that series. His philosophy was a camera is designed and the lens is designed to make things sharp and to show detail. That's kind of what I took away from him. Pictures should be sharp from the foreground to the distance, if you can, and you should have a full range of values from solid black to pure white. There's such a great variety there at Yosemite. Tremendous just variety of subjects to shoot. When I make a photograph, my goal is to have the viewer experience the same emotion when they look at the photograph that I did when I saw the subject. I'm hoping that I can transmit my feelings, my emotions in terms of the print so that the person can get the same response that I did.
You can see more of Furterbar's photographs on his website. Go to thinktv.org and click on the Art Show for the link. And that wraps it up for this edition of the Art Show. Until next time, I'm Rodney Veal, and thank you for watching our show.
Funding for the Art Show was made possible by Montgomery County Arts and Cultural District, the Virginia W. Kettering Foundation, proud supporter of the arts in our community, Ohio Arts Council, Ohio Humanities Council, and viewers like you. Thank you.